We can be.
We must be the first generation
to end extreme poverty.
The generation
Most determined
to fight injustice
and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done.
the global goals.
A 15-year plan
For everyone, everywhere.
with no one left behind.
We will live in a world
Where nobody
anywhere
Lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
Goes hungry.
where no one
wakes in the morning
Asking if there will be food today.
we will live in a world where no child has to die.
Diseases we know how to cure.
And where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world where
Everyone goes to school
and education gives us the knowledge
and skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities
to thrive
And be powerful.
and safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is head down.
we will live in a world
where all people can get clean water.
And proper toilets at home.
At school.
and at work.
We will live in a world where there is sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light,
and power for the whole planet.
Without destroying the planet.
we'll live in a world where economies prosper.
And new wealth.
Lead to decent jobs.
For everyone.
and we will live in a world where our industry
our infrastructure
And our
Best innovations.
Are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
we will live in a world
Where prejudices and extremes of inequality
Are defeated.
Inside our countries,
And between different countries.
where people live in cities and communities
that are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
What we consume.
Planet where we put back what we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back the threat of climate
change.
where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
will restore.
and protect
Life on land.
The forests,
Animals. The earth itself.
With peace between and inside countries.
Where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
With everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people.
Work together.
Partnerships of all kinds.
To make these goals a reality.
These are the United Nations global goals.
For sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
Lofty ambitions, I know, and the reason I started with the global goals in this presentation was everything that we do to do with corporate social responsibility is part of making a contribution to these sorts of things. And I know that's a difficult thing to get our heads around sometimes. You know, how on earth do we solve all of these problems? How do we make an impact? How do we possibly do anything which can make a difference? But I think one of the things that I believe very firmly, and I've seen over my years of experience, is that business has an absolutely key role to play in addressing a lot of these issues. And it's not about all of us doing everything, it's about each of us doing what we can to make a difference in the ways that we're able to, in the areas that we're passionate about, and the things that we believe in, and the things that we have the skills to do. What I want to do in the few minutes that I'm going to talk to you about is to help you to understand how you can make an impact in your business on a day-to-day basis in a way that takes away the guilt that you get when you constantly get requests from people to support different things, and enables you to think about it in a really strategic way, so that when you walk into work every morning, you know that you're doing the right things, that you've made the choices which are making a difference for your people, the people that work for you, for the environment, and for the communities that are around you. Is that okay? So I think CSR for me is the seasoning which kind of runs through a business. It's not the meat and drink, but it's the seasoning. If it's not there, then everything's fairly bland. And I think it can add real value to a business in the day-to-day. One of the businesses that I run is a certification business for CSR in dentistry, of all things. And I had a phone call from somebody who's applying for a gold award at the moment. and they were just full of it. They were full of the buzz. They haven't even got the work done yet. They're just filling in the application form and starting to talk to their team about what they could do. And she said it was palpable, the enthusiasm that there was in the team, because it wasn't them moaning about KPIs and targets and disciplinaries and these sorts of things. They were talking about something that they could do together which would make a difference for others. So very, very powerful. I'm a local boy. My parents, if I could throw a stone about half a mile, they live about half a mile that way. So I grew up round here, so I know the area well, but my journey's taken me overseas a couple of times. I lived in South Africa as a kid for a bit, came back, lived in the New Forest, and then after qualifying as a teacher, I taught for 4 years in Lee Park. Yep, I've got the scars to show it. No, it was a great experience, But having done that, I went into charity management, worked in the music industry for a while, production management, and then an incident involving a curry saw me get into oral health, dentistry. And that took me to Tanzania for 10 years, which I moved out there in 2005. Went out just with my wife, came back with 3 kids in tow, had a fantastic time in there, setting up a charity from the ground up, which trained rural medical workers in emergency dentistry. And it was through doing that work that I started to work with companies from, small dental practices on the corner of the high street, all the way up to global blue chips like GSK, on their CSR programs, delivering some of their projects, and getting inside the heads of some of those guys to see how they were making it work, and how they were making it work so it impacted on their teams, and how they maximised the impact for the communities that they were trying to help as well. And so now my work is about helping business owners of all sizes, everything from a freelancer all the way up to somebody with 6,000 employees, to say, okay, how do we get our heads around this? How do we think about it? How do we make it work for us? And I know that there's a lot of people here that do some fantastic things already, and looking forward to hearing about some of those later. But I think no matter how charitable or uncharitable you are, there are some numbers that you can't argue with. And I think there'll be some nods as I reel these things off, because I think we all intuitively know it, but the numbers are there now. I think the big things that's changed in the last 20 years is that the things that we kind of knew have now got empirical evidence behind them. And I'll share a little bit about that with you. So the major challenge that we all have is that about 9 out of 10 people that walk into our businesses on a Monday morning, be they customers or staff, now expect us to do good, social and environmental good, as a normal part of our business strategy. So not as a tag on, not as something that we do occasionally or at Christmas or when there's a special appeal, but as an integral part of our business strategy. So if you want to win those people over as customers, and if you want to hold on to your people as team and keeping them engaged, then you've got to be thinking about this and what it is that you're going to do about it. A big shift happened 2018. This guy's Lawrence Fink, founder and president of BlackRock. BlackRock invests around $6 trillion of other people's money each year globally. In the beginning of 2018, he wrote to the CEOs of the world's biggest companies and said this: basically, do social good or risk losing our support. Now, BlackRock and Fink do have a philanthropic side to them. They do the right things in lots of different ways. But the reason he said that wasn't because of that philanthropy, it was because it makes good business sense. Because they can see further down the line that companies that take their social and environmental responsibility seriously are less risky and will be more productive and more profitable. So that was a big shift. So there are some expectations on us as business owners. But the good news is that if we do things right, then we were rewarded for it. And Gallup came up with some of these statistics. So 88% of people now expect you to act responsibly, but 93% of people will have a better image of you if you can demonstrate that you're socially responsible. 90% will be more loyal to you, and 88% will trust you more. So they are very much more positive towards you if you can demonstrate that you've got a social responsibility and it flows in an authentic way through your business. With your team, it's very powerful as well. Team engagement is a very hot topic at the moment, because we're realising that we're spending lots and lots of money on salary budgets, but actually getting less than we should do out of people because they're not engaged. Well, employees in responsible businesses are 65% more engaged than non-socially responsible businesses. They're 87% less likely to leave, they're more profitable, they're more productive. I was just chatting to a friend who's a consultant. He works specifically in team engagement, and he was working with a company that had done some studies on team engagement. And they worked out that 25% of the work that was being done by these employees was fixing the problems that had been created by the same employees in the first place. So they had this huge amount of capacity which was being wasted because people weren't engaged. They didn't really care about what they were doing. They didn't understand how to do it properly, and they didn't really have the oomph, something that comes from in here, to want to do it. And social responsibility built into a business in the way that I'm going to show you in a minute really helps with that. This is one to make your eyes water. An engaged employee will generate 120% return on investment for their salary. A disengaged employee, just 80%, and an actively disengaged, the well poisoners, the BMWs that sort of go around bitching, moaning and whining in your business, they're going to generate about 60% of their salary. Okay, so there's a massive swing if you can get people engaged, which is another good reason to think about this stuff seriously. So here's a model that I created to help people to understand what corporate social responsibility is, because often when you say CSR, people think, yeah, we do lots of stuff for charity, and that's great, and charity is a huge part of it. It's a big chunk, but there's also the place you play in the community. Now, as local businesses here, I'm imagining you have a very important part to play in your local community at different levels, with different sectors, different demographics. So if you can make a positive contribution to your community, that's a part of CSR as well. We also look at your environmental footprint, not just your supply chain and your production, depending on what it is that you're doing, but also the choices that you're making, the way that you run the business. Team is a big aspect, about providing strong leadership, about having a well-defined culture, and making sure that you are creating a strong expectation for people about what you want them to do and how you want them to act, giving them a sense of purpose at work, giving them a sense of development, engagement, and then looking after their well-being. And then the final piece that we cover is profile. And some people get uncomfortable with this because CSR has had a bad press because in days gone by, and still nowadays, sadly, a lot of companies use it as a marketing exercise. So we've got a couple of £100,000 to throw at something. We need to get our sales up, so let's sponsor a charity. But the way that we tend to build it into the work that I do with clients is much more subtle than that. And because of the process that I've used, which I'll show you in a second, there's a level of authenticity to it, which means that it holds true. Because I think we can all tell, can't we, when somebody comes out with a new thing, a new initiative, they've just sponsored this, or they're just doing that. You can see from the way that it's done whether it's actually meant or whether it's something which has just been made up and is a bit false, a tick box exercise. So how do you go about it? Always start with values. I think it's really important that, have any of you guys come across Simon Sinek that did the Start With Why talk a few years back? I'm a big fan of that, and I think, well, because it's true, but if you start with why you're doing something and what's important to you, then everything else flows from that. If you start with what are we going to do, so often I walk in with a client and they go, we've got all these ideas for what we could do for fundraising. It's no, we're going to walk it right back to, why did you buy the business? Why did you start the business? What's important to you? What does it look like when on a good day? How do you want people to behave? What do you want them to do? We look at those things first. We start with values. We then move on into, in light of those values, what commitments are we going to make as a business to our CSR? And there are 6 areas that we look at. So the first one is, who are we going to support? What's important to us? What do we really connect with as a business? What's a fit for us as a business? What makes sense to us? And not just who are we going to choose for the next 3 months or the next 6 months, but who are we going to choose for the next year, the next 2 years, that we can get alongside that we can learn from, that we can contribute to in a meaningful way. We can build up a relationship and actually make a difference. One of the first companies that I worked with when I lived in Tanzania was a very big gold mining company, and they would come into an area for 30 years. They'd make a multi-billion-dollar investment in an area to build a mine. They employ huge amounts of local people, and take the gold out of the ground for 30 years. After 30 years, the mine would close. At the beginning of the 30 years, they would start making some strategic decisions about what they were going to do, which would mean that when they pulled out in 30 years' time, people were able to carry on. They did training, stuff that didn't involve the mine, so that the community was left in a much better place than when they started. And I think even on a small scale, with our charity partnerships, that's how we should be thinking. The second thing is, how do we want to look after and inspire our people? The days have long gone, and I think I'm preaching to the converted here that we can carry a big stick and expect people to perform for us. We have to give them a level of inspiration, a level of purpose, belief in them, investment in them, and so that needs to be thought about strategically as well. What can we do differently to manage our environmental footprint at all levels? And it, depending on the sort of business that you've got, that will be different, but we take a very close look at that. It's important to have some skin in the game. I was chatting to Helen earlier about, people don't have lots of money to put into things, especially if you're just getting going. Howard Schultz, by the way, says that the foundation for corporate social responsibility is financial sustainability. So if you're in startup, you shouldn't be putting any money into it. You can still do the other things around team, environment, and how you manage things, but the money thing comes later. But for your team, if you've got team, you've got employees, people need to see some sort of tangible commitment at whatever level that is, whether that's leveraged or whether it's a donation. So we look about how we can generate funds and how we can generate funds by doing fundraising activities together. And then a bit that I love doing is putting the whole piece together with the team. What are we actually going to do together? And not knowing your businesses, like it's difficult to know what you would do in those cases, but everything from a bake sale to a Tough Mudder to an overseas challenge to a fun run. There are lots of different things that we can do together to have fun and put it into a plan so it happens consistently. And then the final piece would be how we talk about it. So that's the way that I tend to work, is to follow those 6 areas. There are some great examples of people that have done this well, and Timpson, been around for over 100 years, family-owned business. Anybody know what Timpson does for their corporate social responsibility?
They do a lot with prisoners, training prisoners and then recruiting them, don't they?
That's right, yeah.
They have holiday homes around the country for their staff to use.
Yeah. So they're very, very keen on their people, so that's built into the values. They do recruit in prisons, and then so there's a pathway out for people coming out, ex-offenders coming out into the community. Free suit cleaning, I think, as well, for people that are going for a job interview and stuff like that. So some really good stuff. Just up the road, Montezuma's, they've thought about everything: supply chain, packaging, foundation, which Ben works with them, which is fantastic. But again, they've thought about people. How do we want to look after people? What are we going to do environmentally? What can we do for our community? And then the original ethical business started out very strongly against animal testing. That's flowed through into packaging. Started Children on the Edge way back when. And these are all well-known brands, but all the principles that they've used to do it authentically can be used in a small business as well. So if you walk away from this tonight and you go, okay, fine, Mark, but what am I going to do about it? These are 3 things that I'd suggest you do. First, reflect on your values. What do you believe about your people? What do you believe about how you want to treat the environment? And what do you think your role in the community should be? In light of those values, what should your commitments be as a business? And this is all one sheet of paper stuff, just simple bullet points. So think about the areas I talked about before. So who can you support? How do you care for your people? How do you care for the environment? What you're going to give and what you're going to do and how you're going to communicate it. And then finally, just pick one thing that you could do differently this quarter. As I said, CSR is the seasoning. It's not the main thing. you're here to run businesses. That's the main thing you do. But if you add some of this into what you're doing, then it can add huge value. Build it up slowly. Don't feel bad about going slowly, because these things take time to build in if they're going to really have an impact. Most people, when we talk about CSR, they start with the heart. I want to do the right thing. It's about fairness, about giving back, about making a difference, and that's absolutely right. What I hope I've shown you this evening is that actually there's a real head case for this as well. There's a real strong business case for this, which if you do it in a strategic way. The key thing is to take some action, make some notes, do some of the things that I've talked about. I do help businesses with this. If you'd like me to help, I do a lunchtime drop-in and plan. I'll go away and write the plan for you, give it back to you so you can implement it yourself, and then I do full consultancy and support as well. There are free resources available on my website, which is marktopley.co.uk, and then my Facebook page has stuff as well. There's something on my website called the 60-minute CSR plan, which is a free download. That's worth having a look at if you're interested in doing this. So that's that. Back to the global goals. It's a worthy aspiration. Some would say utopian to think about a world that looks like that. And some people would describe what I do as utopian once. But actually I'm quite cool with that, because utopia is all about living from a place of your dreams, isn't it? And putting your aspirations into words. And I think I'd rather live from a place of that than complacency or apathy or complaining about how the world is. I think we've all got a role to play in it. Thanks very much. Any questions?